For more, we can bring in France 24's international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, what's been agreed so far?
Okay, well, this first agreement here that we've been talking about on Hodeida is, I think, the main agreement that if these talks are going to take place in Rimbo in Sweden, which is just northeast of Stockholm, if there was one thing that was going to be negotiated there that the two sides would come away with, and the United Nations as well, it was the reopening of this port city of Hodeida. Why is it so important? That's because Hodeida is the city, the port from which most humanitarian aid, most food aid comes into Yemen. It's been closed for years, and it's prevented that very, very necessary aid from getting into the country, which explains why there is such widespread famine in Yemen, why we've seen these horrendous images of starving children, starving people, famine left, right and centre in Yemen, basically because Hodeida has been under siege and that food aid hasn't been getting in. So if there's one necessary agreement to be worked out in Sweden, it was that one. And it appears to be done. We saw this handshake a little bit earlier on for the first time between the Houthi rebel leader and the Yemeni foreign minister, which I don't think anybody would have thought possible a week ago before these peace talks started. So that, I think, can be described as a major breakthrough. The United Nations says that the withdrawal of forces from the city will be overseen by the United Nations and policed by local forces. So we don't have a time limit on when this food aid is going to start getting back into Hodeida and back into the country, but that is the main agreement that's come out of these talks. Another agreement was a decision by both sides to allow for a prisoner swap. That's following a tour of the region by the UN representative for Yemen, who's been quite busy, Martin Griffiths, going from one country to another to try to negotiate this. That appears to have been negotiated, and that is also going to take place. What we don't have, and what is also important, is an agreement on opening the airport in Sana'a and also in Aden, which still aren't open and which the United Nations wants to reopen for domestic flights.
Now, just to remind our viewers that the Yemeni conflict has gone on for nearly 4 years now. It's pushed 14 million people to the brink of starvation. Philip, last week when these talks started, the bar was set very, very low, but there has been huge progress made today.
Well, I think we have to take it for what it is. We have the United Nations Secretary General being very cautious during his press conference a while ago, saying, OK, we've made progress. This is a long-term negotiation. We weren't expecting to come out of this with a complete ceasefire in the Yemeni war. We have a ceasefire in Hodeida. We don't have it elsewhere in the country. There's no agreement to stop that, but at least we've made one step in the right direction. He seemed to remain fairly upbeat about the fact that the airport issue could be resolved before another round of peace talks is scheduled to be held in January. But he says several times during his press conference, no military solution, only a diplomatic solution to this problem. It's going to be complex, it's going to be lengthy, but the talks in Sweden were what he described as a meaningful beginning. And I think that this agreement that they've negotiated today on Hodeida is much more than they've ever managed to negotiate at any other previous peace talks.
Indeed, a lot of progress today. Thank you very much for that, Philip Turle there.